welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Bryony Billson and this is the show where you get the chance to have your questions answered by our resident property experts. So let's see who we have on the panel today. First of all, a warm welcome to Paul Mahoney, Managing Director of Nova Financial Group. Welcome. Thank you. John Howard, property developer and author.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. And Steven Galpin, property consultant.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Right, we're going to go straight into our first question from one of our listeners, and this is from to you, Steven. It's quite a long question, but with it's a really brilliant one at the end, so we'll stick with it. I've received 3 letters from a company claiming to be specialists in reclaiming stamp duty, advising us that we may have overpaid £6,208 in stamp duty when we bought our house because it was an annex. They have offered to make a claim on our behalf on a no-win, no-fee basis. I'm not sure what the fee would be, but assume it would be a percentage of the successful claim. So we purchased our house in September 2018, and it does indeed have a separate annex, which has 2 units with a bedroom and a bathroom each. One also has a lounge. The previous owner used this as accommodation for their sons, and then more recently as a B&B. Have we overpaid stamp duty because the house has an annex?
Right, well, if we've got half an hour. No, look, I think there's an overriding principle here is that stamp duty is another tax that we have to pay, and it's quite a delicate path to tread if you want to avoid or minimise that liability. Now look, there's 2 things here. One, the company that's written to the viewer about offering this service on a no-win, no-fee. I'm not so worried about the no-win, no-fee and how much they get. What I'm worried about is the penalty if they're found to be wrong, which can be several times the amount that could have been potentially saved or claimed.
Wow, okay.
So first thing I'd want to know is whether that company takes on the liability for any backlash from revenue. I think that's the most important thing. I think there may, I did look into this question before the programme with some legal colleagues of mine, and there may be an opportunity to argue that because the construction is temporary and an add-on to the building, you could possibly attribute a value to it and then remove it from the overall value of the house, a little bit like you would do if you were selling the house with your furniture. Mm-hmm. But it just seems to me, for the sake of £6,000 and the risk of probably a fine from revenue if it goes wrong of several times that amount, I just wonder whether the exercise is really worthwhile and whether you wouldn't be better having a good night's sleep.
Presumably there's a loophole with the annex though. That's the key, isn't it?
Well, I think that is the key, but the trouble is it's like a lot of these loopholes that people find, or theoretical loopholes, is that it might be 1, 2, 3 or 4 years later down the line when actually revenue have repaid you, and then decide that it was a bad call, and they can come back at you. So you're not only paying an increased fine, you're paying interest on the amount that you should have paid in the first place. And you see the lawyers that deal with you on this, the solicitors, they're going to say, look, it's just not worth it. We're the ones that are going to get in trouble for advising you wrongly, or perhaps...
In the first place they do, yeah.
So I'd just be very nervous. I'd really want to know who these advisory people are and where their standing is. But in my view, probably not worth the risk.
I mean, do you feel like you agree with those points then?
I think so. What you've got to remember is if a solicitor gets the stamp duty wrong, he gets double the fine of the stamp duty. So when you're doing the transaction in the first place, so they are very cautious solicitors, and they're right, and that's what you're paying for. You're paying for them to be professional and cautious and on the whole correct.
It's probably a good point there though, rather than using this company and paying them a fee, go back to the solicitors you used initially, because it's their responsibility to
and that's the
calculate, as you
question.
say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you do it wrongly?
Yeah.
And if so, can we fix it?
Yeah, good point.
Okay, fantastic. Great advice there. Thank you very much from all 3 of you. Okay, so my next question is going to go to you, John.
Good.
I'm a first-time buyer with a budget of $250,000 looking for a property in England. What are my options to maximise the money I've got available?
Goodness me, that is a big question.
It's a broad one, isn't it?
Broad question, okay. Well, on the whole, I'll stick outside London because for $250 you're not going to get a lot inside London. Well, it doesn't say whether they're using the Help to Buy scheme, which the government have brought out, which is absolutely fantastic. 10 billion they've put into that scheme, and it allows you to borrow a deposit. Because if they haven't done, then they might be able to go to 300,000. So I think that's one of the questions I'd like to ask them if I met them. Certainly, anywhere else in the UK, just about they can buy something. And I would always go for the best area you can afford, because that's likely to go up in value more than a weaker area.
Okay, interesting. Anything from either
I'll
of
just
you,
add to that.
Sue?
I don't think they mentioned whether they've got 250 cash or whether that's the property price they can buy.
I'm assuming that's with the mortgage.
It might be with the mortgage, but if it's not, my best advice would be use a mortgage.
Exactly.
Better utilise your money. Mortgages are pretty cheap at the moment compared to the returns you can get from property. Leverage as much as you can, really, in most cases. Obviously seek advice, but to best utilise your money, it will go a lot further with the use of a mortgage.
And Stephen, do you agree with the advice of it's good to buy in an area that's already
Stephen and I will disagree on this big time.
My colleagues accuse me weekly of being London-centric.
Right.
London-centric.
Picked the wrong person with
You
that.
have done. Well done.
Well, no, it's interesting to hear. What would your take on it be then?
Well, I just think my advice on it would just be a general one. You buy, you control your asset in an area where you can see it, touch it, feel it, you're able to control it. If you start buying out of area, wherever that may be...
But they've only got 250,000.
Well, then...
First time buy. I mean, I know, Stephen, you've never been out of London in 10 years. But London, there is other areas apart from London to buy in.
Really?
Yeah.
No, but I mean... Paul's right. It depends whether it's a £200,000 cash import or whether it's geared.
First time buyer as well. I assume it was,
You're going to 200,000. If you want to pay cash, you're going to have to look outside of London. If it's a matter of gearing it up, then
you can buy in London.
You can buy.
But I'm assuming it was a first time buyer.
Do any of you have any areas outside of London that you're keeping your eyes on at the moment?
Yes.
That you feel like sharing with our listeners?
Well, I would always go to, if you're looking to look at an area that's going to improve, then you want to find something nearby that's going to make it improve. Yeah. So, for instance, it might be a new railway line, it might be better access, it might be a new dual carriageway. That's always a good angle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like major cities with depth, major that actually have their own economies within them, lots of employment, that sort of thing. So, if we're looking at the UK, places like Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool are hard to overlook, I think.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to keep you talking, Paul, because the next question is coming to you. I have 2 properties that I bought for cash, one of which is my primary residence and one is a flat I rent out. I've just taken a buy-to-let mortgage on the flat and wonder what's the best way forward to building my property portfolio. Do I buy one property with that money and then mortgage it again? Or do I use that money to buy 2 properties, putting down a 20% deposit and get 2 mortgages?
Okay, good question. And similar to the point I made on the last question, or the one before it, was utilise mortgages as much as you can. I think a lot of people's mind, they struggle to separate the difference between good debt and bad debt. Bad debt is your home loan, your credit cards, your car loan. It improves your lifestyle, but it hurts your finances. Whereas good debt is investment debt. It helps you better utilise your money. It's generally tax deductible. And especially when it comes to property, it's the differentiating factor between property and other investment options. As a cash buyer, property returns are quite similar to shares, for example. But with leverage, nothing really touches property. The fact that you can get 20-30% returns on your cash per annum, your cash invested, by using mortgages, whilst only achieving relatively average returns on the asset, is pretty incredible, in my opinion. So for this person particularly, utilise as much of that investment debt as they can. So I think they gave 2 options as well, whether to buy essentially with the cash they release or whether to take mortgages on 2. I'd say you're better off taking mortgages on 2. Something they didn't mention was that it sounds like their home is debt-free as well. They could also look to utilise some equity within the home, and they could do 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So don't go crazy all at once, but seek advice. The fact that you can borrow at 2 or 3% and achieve returns of far, far greater than that means that you should have borrowings. Well, most people should have borrowings, in my opinion, unless you're already very wealthy.
Fantastic, yeah. Thank you. Brilliant advice there. Okay, well, a fantastic start to the first half of today's show. Thank you for all your advice on those 3 questions. We're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because we'll be back with more of your property question time questions.
The tax system has evolved significantly over recent years for property investors and developers. You may think that you and your accountant have a grip on these changes. However, unless you're receiving specialist tax advice from a specialist tax advisory firm, then it's unlikely to be the case. At ETC Tax, our team of highly experienced chartered tax advisors work with private individuals and companies to deliver effective tax planning whilst meeting HMRC compliance requirements. Let us help you to meet your personal or commercial objectives in the most tax-efficient manner. ETC Tax, making the complex simple.
If you're considering renovating or building your own home, then you'll not want to miss the National Home Building and Renovating Show from the 28th to the 31st of March at the NEC in Birmingham. Get access to the Advice Centre, including Michael Holmes, the Director of Content at the Home Building and Renovation magazine, and Editorial Director Jason Orme. Get a free 15-minute appointment with an expert, including planners, builders, architects and more. There'll be over 100 exhibitors showcasing their latest innovations and ideas to help you improve or extend your home.
Property is a great investment option, but it's one of the largest purchases that you'll ever make. As individuals, we're all limited by our resources, and regardless of our experience, knowledge or time, we can achieve much more with the help of a qualified team and extra resources being available. Nova Financial specialise in assisting clients to achieve financial freedom through property investment. With over 100 years of experience, we shape your family's future. To invest in property with absolute confidence, call us on 0203 8600 or visit nova.financial.
If you've got a question about property, why not ask an expert? Property Question Time gives you the opportunity to ask anything you want, whether it's about planning, finance, conveyancing, moving abroad, literally anything that's property related. The Property TV panel of experts are available to answer your questions no matter how complex they may seem. Simply email your question to info@propertytelevision.tv and join us on Sky Channel 189 to hear your questions answered.
Welcome back to Property Question Time. I'm Bryony Billson, and with me today on the panel we have Stephen, John and Paul. And we're going to go straight to you, Stephen, with one of our questions. I understand that the buy-to-let market in the northwest is really buoyant. I live in the south, and the idea of investing my money in a property in the north is quite scary, as I know nothing about the area and would very rarely be able to see the house I invested in. Is this normal, and how do others manage this geographical problem?
Right, well, I know I'm going to get berated by my two
believe they've
colleagues.
given you this question.
Right. Well, first of all, let me say nothing wrong with the north of England. Nothing wrong with property investment there. But if you live in the south of England, just think about the practicalities. I think the questioner has actually answered their own question in the first 2 paragraphs. It's a long way away. I can rarely visit it. So how are you going to control it? Now, if you're prepared to put that in the hands of agents up there, agents that you trust, that will work well with your property, absolutely fine. If you're not sure, then I'd say steer clear. The obvious attraction is that the further north you get, the better value you get. And in some cases, the higher return. But there is that risk with that. If you can't manage it yourself, then you've got this problem. Now, I do have a colleague who's very well known in the property business that would say, if you can't see the telecom tower, don't do it in London. But it is harsh advice. And you see, what I would say, the questioner asks at the end, well, how do other people manage it? I think it's a question of volume in a way. You know, if you've got 10 properties in Manchester, then it very much becomes worthwhile for an agent up there to look after you, to care about your properties, really give you the service you need. If you've got one relatively small flat, a one bedroom or something with a fairly modest income attached to it, you're just not going to get the service. You're going to have to provide part of that service yourself at least, and in that respect I'd stay clear.
What I would say...
Is that balancing enough
not
for
really,
you, Mr.
no,
Howard? No.
Not really. What I would say is that I mean, I've got properties in the Isle of Wight that I haven't seen for 25 years.
Wow, okay.
So you don't have to be there to control the situation or so. And okay, yes, we've got reasonable sized portfolio. It's a bit different probably to someone starting out. And my advice normally for starting out is stick to be local, because you've got more confidence in the area, and for your first purchase at least, I would always try and stick to relatively local. Now, Paul might say something totally different in a minute.
Yeah, look, I think if you've got the luxury of sticking local,
Yeah.
and local makes sense as an investment,
Yes.
fine.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to investing, it should be unemotional and commercially minded.
Absolutely.
And I encourage my clients not to worry about where it is, invest where it makes the most sense.
Yep.
And I agree with the question asker that Northwest is a good place to invest at the moment. If you have the right people around you, you don't have to go these things alone. Property isn't a DIY activity anymore, in my opinion. You should seek advice when doing it. And if you're working with professionals that know the area, that know the right team for you in the area, there's really no reason that you should ever have to see your property. And in fact, it's a little bit silly that you should feel like you have to see it, because what are you going to do? If you've got a property manager in place, driving past it every now and again to make sure it's still there is, just when you think about it, a little bit silly. So I would say identify the right location, identify the right property in that location and invest in it, regardless of how close it is to you, if you've got the right team and the right advisors around you to give you the confidence that it will look after itself.
Yeah, I think that's all brilliant advice. I think it partly also comes down to perhaps what you were touching upon is maybe to do with the personality behind, or what stage you're at with developing.
I think so.
Personally, I started with 2 properties in London. When I moved to Manchester, I actually did find it quite stressful having 2 properties in London. It just...
what a worry that is, eh? 2 nice properties in London. We'd all love that.
But I was also managing, I was managing them
throwing
myself,
things
and
at the TV
it was
at the
too hard work.
This really does come down to there's a good lesson here.
Okay.
There's a good lesson here that I think we'd all agree on. Property, whether it's 1 property or 10, it's a business.
Yes.
And if you're not business minded, bear that in mind.
Yeah.
Because
Get help, get
sometimes
advice.
you're going to have to make some tough decisions, and you need professionals around you, you need a team around you. And I say my earlier sort of fear is that going into a strange area, whether you've got the confidence or the business ability to be able to choose those professionals.
I think, Stephen, without the support is the key.
Yeah,
if there's support there, then I can understand it.
And perhaps also that business mindset. It's quite hard to get that in your first couple of properties. It develops as you develop your property portfolio, and you're able to make more of those decisions that don't bring so much emotion. But I think if this is a new venture for
By the way, there shouldn't be any emotion. No emotion. It's business.
Yes. Excellent, thank you. I think we answered that question well for that person.
I think you wrote the question.
Okay, so we're going to move on to John. This question is for you. My daughter and husband recently inherited a small property from her in-laws and wants to move their family into a bigger house.
Right.
However, they are also toying with the idea of refinancing completely and instead of just moving, keeping their current house as one to let out. Is there any advice you can offer before they make this huge step?
Yes, do it.
Okay.
Be brave.
Bold, brave,
Bold, brave.
but not emotional?
And not too emotional.
Not too
Obviously, you can afford to be emotional when you're going to live in the house yourself.
Yes.
So it is a very different purchase.
It is, yes.
And you don't need to be looking, saying, oh, how much money can I make on this house? If it's your home, it's your home. I've lived in my home 26 years. I didn't buy it thinking, oh, great, I'm going to sell it in a few years' time and make more money, because it's my home. Totally different to business. So if they can afford to keep one and rent it out and buy another one on the back of it by refinancing on both properly, then absolutely, please do so. Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so.
Anything from either of you to add to that?
Just from a finance perspective, consider the fact that because they've kept a place that they didn't buy as an investment, it won't be a straight buy-to-let mortgage. It will be what's called a consumer mortgage or a let-to-buy.
Okay.
So it's not the same as your traditional commercial buy-to-let mortgage. There's a few extra hoops to jump through. So again, seek advice. Find out what
Will interest rates be similar, Paul?
Interest rates are quite similar.
Yeah.
There's just more hoops to jump
Yeah.
through because it's a regulated mortgage
Yes.
as opposed to a commercial
Yeah.
mortgage.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that and make sure you deal with the right broker. Don't just go down and speak to your local bank because that's just one of the many lenders out there that you might be able to get a better deal elsewhere.
Thank you. And Stephen, is there anything you would add to that in terms of perhaps managing that balance between this is a business decision, this is a property development business choice, and when you're looking at property that's for your home?
Well, of course, there's a great difference there. As John said, he's lived in his home for many, many years. The only thing I would say is don't forget that we do have in this country, whether it lasts or not, I don't know, the marvellous opportunity of being able to take a profit on our home without paying any tax at all.
True.
And so as long as you don't go down the path of, changing home 3 times a year and have Inland Revenue jump on you for trading your home, as long as you do it in a reasonable manner and there's some reason for your move, then it's something that should be taken advantage of, I think. Paul, would you go with that, Paul?
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing that I didn't mention there so far as the business mindset to it is, does the one they're going to keep actually make sense as a buy-to-let?
Yes, because it
that's
might be
another
they
thing
want
to
to sell
consider.
that and
They
buy,
didn't
and
mention
buy,
where it
and
is
buy a
or-
different one, to be fair.
Yeah,
But I'm
exactly.
assuming that they were happy with the, and the
But
cost of
consider the
buying
fact,
and
is it
selling
going
it
to
and
rent,
so on.
who's the target market, all that sort of thing to make sure it actually makes sense to keep was something worth considering.
Okay, thank you. Some brilliant advice for that person there. Final question is to you, Paul. I'm seriously concerned about a large tax bill and can only really release equity in my home to pay it. Because the interest HMRC charge is huge, I'm feeling there's no option. Is there a best way to do this?
Okay, there's a number of different ways you could do it, so far as releasing the equity from your home or securing a loan against your home. To my knowledge, most lenders don't like you taking a traditional mortgage to clear a debt.
Okay.
They want to know why you're taking the mortgage, and that will be a red flag to some of them if it is being taken for the purpose of clearing a debt. To be honest, I'm not completely sure whether the fact that it's HMRC makes it better or not, but I could look into it. There's other things like short-term loans they could take, like bridging type loans against their home.
Expensive,
They would be expensive. They could approach their bank for a personal loan. There's a number of different avenues they could explore, on the sort of finance product spectrum. But I'd say first off, the home loan probably would be the cheapest option, but keep in mind that a home loan is supposed to be a 20 or 30 year loan. So if you're using it to clear a short-term debt, perhaps there's better options. And that's why lenders don't like you using it for that purpose, because essentially by you taking a mortgage, you're committing to them that sort of period of time.
Okay, well, what I'm hearing from you is that there are actually a lot of options, and that's what this person was saying. I'm feeling there's no option, but actually they've got a load of
There are a lot of
things
options,
for
but
available.
I think there's something more fundamental that needs to be looked at here, is how did they incur this tax
How did they get into
liability,
this situation?
and why didn't they take provision for it from the profit that they made on
You're
whatever they made it on?
You're sounding like my accountant now.
Well, I wish.
Okay.
But no, I think it's important, and again, when you're dealing in property, don't forget the tax liability.
Yeah, absolutely, really important.
You've got to cater for it. It's no good just taking all your profit, shoving it into the next deal, and then running out of cash.
Yeah.
We
all have to pay
you can't buy a loaf of bread with bricks and mortar.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, take advice then. So you're professional advice before you get yourself into that kind of situation. Okay, well, unfortunately, that is all we've got time for. A huge thank you to all three of you for giving some really fantastic and valuable advice to our listeners there. And thank you to you at home for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. If you have any questions you'd like to send to the experts at Property Question Time, you can submit them via our website, on social media, or email us on info@propertytelevision.co.uk.
Now we're here today to talk about your book. It's John Howard's Inside Guide to Property Development and Investment for Newcomers. So John is an expert in property. He's bought and sold over 3,500 properties. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write it in the first place?
So it's a really good guide, I believe, from the very start to the end of the process. In the book, I actually explain the pitfalls that I've had, and so after every chapter there's an example of what to do because I've done it.
And what would you expect a reader to walk away, the main sort of pieces of information that they come away from?
This book can save them a lot of time and a lot of money. And if they're serious about getting into buying and selling property or buying and renting property out, I go through how to fund things. I go through about picking an agent, about picking the solicitor, about picking a builder, about the pitfalls of builders. They always have 3 jobs on at once.
Now, the property market is always changing, so it's very important to keep up with things like this, isn't it, if you're looking to get into property?
So in the book, I explain what to do in a hot market and what to do when things start to go wrong. And that's the most important advice in the book, totally, I think, what to do when it goes wrong. I'm not going to tell you now. You can buy the book and read all about it, because I've done it. I've survived 4 property recessions, 3 or 4.
The tax system has evolved significantly over recent years for property investors and developers. You may think that you and your accountant have a grip on these changes. However, unless you're receiving specialist tax advice from a specialist tax advisory firm, then it's unlikely to be the case. At ETC Tax, our team of highly experienced chartered tax advisors work with private individuals and companies to deliver effective tax planning whilst meeting HMRC compliance requirements. Let us help you to meet your personal or commercial objectives in the most tax-efficient manner. ETC Tax, making the complex simple.
If you've got a question about property, why not ask an expert? Property Question Time gives you the opportunity to ask anything you want, whether it's about planning, finance, conveyancing, moving abroad, literally anything that's property related. The Property TV panel of experts are available to answer your questions no matter how complex they may seem. Simply email your question to info@propertytelevision.tv and join us on Sky Channel 189 to hear your questions answered.
Meet the Author is a brand new mini-series involving leading experts in the property industry, including mentors, developers, property lawyers, and other industry experts who share insightful stories about their journey and their books. Each book is compiled by authors with years of valuable experience, tips, and observations, providing you with new knowledge about the property industry. To find out more, visit the website property-tv.co.uk/library.